G'day guys, welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome, and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget the bell so you never miss a new video. Let's begin. Churches. A place of worship and spirituality for billions of people across the globe. Often referred to as God's house. One would not expect to find any form of evil presence in one. In our story today, that's exactly what happened to our poster. Something wonderful and innocent quickly becomes something corrupted and sinister. Sit back, relax, and say your prayers as we enter the church from hell. Enjoy. This is a bit of a long story, but even recalling it now gives me chills. Sorry for any typos, I had to type this out on my phone. When I was a freshman in college, I took the summer off to work and make some extra money to support my family. During the school year, I got a stipend from the Veterans Administration for school, but summers were really tough financially. There wasn't much in the way of decent jobs where I lived, as the local economy sucked, but I managed to score a pretty sweet deal. I'm Native American, and the local tribe sponsors a program where people under the age of 25 can choose a local job and work in exchange for the tribe paying them instead of the business. I had a few prospects, but settled on a custodial job at a local church. I thought it would be nice to lend a hand to them anyways, as their aging custodian didn't always have the time to get to everything between his other jobs. The church did a lot for our community too. I can recall many instances of them making sure low-income families had food on their tables and paying the utilities for a lot of elderly people who severely needed it. I thought it would be nice to give back to them in some way. The job was easy and the pay was nice for what it was. Tribal minimum wage is much higher than the federal minimum wage, so I was pretty happy about that. The custodian gave me a rundown of what I was supposed to take care of between services, but after that, I was on my own for the remainder of my time working there. Like I said, the job was easy enough. I'd arrive about 7 AM to pick up what little accumulated on the lawn, move inside to vacuum when necessary, and service the bathrooms. Every few days I dusted or weed-eated, but the majority of my work was inside the church. The other custodian did the majority of the mowing in the evenings after I left. The only complaint I had with the job was the church didn't have the money to run the AC during the week when no one was there. So the church was extremely hot inside. Aside from that, everything was really great. I really enjoyed being able to work on my own, and the peace and quiet was much appreciated. I was supposed to work 8 hours a day, but my work rarely took more than 5 or 6. I tended to work pretty slow, so I would still have something to do throughout the week. At one point, the manager of the program told me that if I finished work early, I could take a paid siesta on a comfortable couch at the church. A job that pays you to take a nap? Sounds like a win-win, right? Let me tell you a little bit about the church. It was the second largest in the town I lived in, but it wasn't too terribly massive. There were probably 50 or so rooms, with about 2 to 3 sub-rooms within those rooms. Most of them were rarely used though, so I didn't have to bother with regular cleanings. The church was split into 2 buildings, the main building, which was where the services and most of my work took place, and a fellowship building that was located down a short walkway from the main building. The main building itself had a few quirks. The main sanctuary where the services took place was in the centre of the building with large double doors out front, and the rest of the church was built around it. I think the sanctuary was the original church, but as the church grew, they built around it. The outer portion of the church was sectioned into 3 long hallways, with classrooms littering the halls. The hallways formed a very angular, upside-down U-shape around and behind the sanctuary. There were a few other things that made the job interesting. The church had a problem with vandals breaking in from time to time, so when I got there in the morning, I always locked the door behind me as I moved through the building. I always double checked the entry, exit doors once I arrived to make sure they were locked and secure. I was there by myself, but I figured my car parked out front would dissuade anyone from wanting to break in. Another quirk was that the building had been built with an absence of windows. The main sanctuary was the only room that had any windows, save for the window on one entry door, important later, and thus it was the only room that wasn't pitch black when the lights were off. The last quirk I remember was that the wiring in the building was quite bad. It wasn't a shock hazard or a fire hazard, but it wasn't designed very well. Some of the light switches or breakers didn't control the lights or power for any rooms nearby. One in the hall, for example, controlled the lights and power for a small room on the other side of the building. Still, the job was a pretty sweet deal. The first month of work was pretty uneventful. The journalist showed up at 7 AM, did my thing, and left by 4 PM. Can't really remember anything exceptionally creepy, but then if anything had been going on, I probably dismissed it. The first truly odd thing that happened seemed to come out of nowhere. It was the middle of the day and I had been vacuuming and checking classrooms. All of a sudden, I started to feel really ill. It was hot in there, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't dehydrated. I went to the back center hall of the U, where the water fountain was, and made sure to drink plenty of water. I sat on the bench in the hallway. The center of the hall was the only lit in the building, as I had turned the breakers off to save the church money on utilities. As I sat on the bench, I started to feel ill again, only it felt different this time. I got this odd feeling in the front of my head. It's hard to describe, but it felt like someone had their hand in my brain and was groping around. The next thing I knew, I fell over on the bench and passed out. I was only out for half an hour, but while I was out, I remember having a vivid nightmare. In my nightmare, I was alone in a poorly lit dining hall. A great table was in the centre and luxury chairs surrounding it. A feast had been set at the table, but there was no one sitting at the table. The only light in the room was from candles on the table. I started to sit down at the table to figure out what was going on, but before I could, I noticed something odd about the shadows cast by the candlelight. The lights cast only one shadow. At the far end of the table, the shadows cast the silhouette of a large figure sitting at the end of the table in the head chair. The silhouette was massive and looked to be that of an 8-foot tall man. I didn't know much, but I knew to fear whatever was making that shadow. I got up from the table to run away, but there was no door to exit. The last part of the dream I remembered was cowering on the floor while the silhouette loomed over me like a cat over a doomed mouse. I woke up at that point, but when I opened my eyes I couldn't move the rest of my body. I stared forward, and for a brief second I could have sworn the figure was standing over me. I fought with all my might to move any part of my body, but to no avail. I passed out again. I woke up shortly thereafter, frightened and sore all over. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, but I dismissed it all as a bad, heat-induced dream. I didn't let it get to me much, and I finished my day. The next day when I moved in the church, something seemed off. I still can't put my finger on it, but the lights seemed to have a strange glow to them, and the hallways didn't feel so empty. I tried to ignore it and get my job done quickly, so I could leave the main building. Over the next few days, I suffered several more instances of what I now know to be sleep paralysis. I would sit down for a break, get that strange feeling in my head, and pass out. Each time I had that dream, with only slight variations. The only thing that ever happened differently was that I'd run into a different corner of the room to get away, but to no avail. I started dreading going to work, but I needed the money. A few weeks passed, and things seemed like they were starting to get back to normal. I'd stopped having the sleep paralysis, and I thought whatever was going on was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was nearing the end of my day. I'd just finished cleaning one wing of the U, and had moved to the centre hall where the water fountains were. I turned the lights off in the hallway I'd just been working off, and turned the lights on the hallway I was now working on. In the middle of my work, I had to go to the restroom, which happened to also be in the centre hall next to the water fountains. I did my business and went out in the hall again. I had started vacuuming when I noticed something odd. The lights in the hall I'd previously turned off were on again. I initially dismissed it as me forgetting and tried to work, but I kept getting this awful feeling. When I got to the far end of the centre hall away from the one I'd previously cleaned, I heard a large crash. I rushed back to the hall, thinking the ceiling must have collapsed or something, only to find that nothing seemed to have been disturbed. Bewildered, I decided it would be best to forget the whole thing and get back to work. As I was at the point in the hall where I was when I'd heard the loud crash, when I heard another sound. It was a door hinge creaking. I turned quickly to see one of the Sunday school classroom doors swinging slowly back and forth, like it had just been opened. That door had a faulty knob, so it would never close if you just let it fall shut. The light in the classroom was on, but as I stared, the light turned off. At that point, all I could think was, someone must have broken in. I was scared, but also angry, as I knew the subroom from that room was where the children's fundraising money was kept in a locked box. I wasn't about to let someone steal from the church. I said in the most authoritative voice I could muster, "I know you're in there. Come out now, and we can forget this ever happened. I'll let you walk away, and if you do what I say, I won't even call the cops." That last part was a lie. I had every intention of calling the police, but for now, I was locked inside with an intruder. Slowly approaching the classroom, I pulled out my utility knife. When I got to the door, I pushed it forward and entered the room quickly, knife in one hand and a flashlight in the other, looking in both directions. When I saw no one, I quickly moved to the subroom and checked it out. Again, I saw no one. I went back to the light switch and flicked it on. I swear I checked every square inch of that room. No one was in there. At this point, I was very unsettled. It was about 3:45, so I decided I'd finish the rest of the cleaning later. I turned the lights off again, this time feeling dread with every switch flipped off. As I was at the end of the centre hall, again almost where I'd been standing when I heard the other noises, I heard the door creak again. I turned quickly, shining my light down the hall to see the door moving back and forth again. The light flickered on again, only this time it was different. The light was on, but there was a darkness in the room, so black that it seemed to be eating the light surrounding it. I didn't care anymore. I turned to run out of there as fast as I could. I heard the door behind me slam open, followed by the sound of large, lumbering steps following me down the hall. I ran to an exit door at the other far end of the U, quickly unlocking the door and tumbling out, falling to the ground. I got back up and pushed the door closed, reaching for my keys to lock it. I held the door closed but could feel someone on the other side pressing against it with tremendous amount of force. I looked through the glass window on the door, but I couldn't see anyone on the other side. Whatever was pressing against the door was slowly winning ground. I dug my feet in, but I felt my boots starting to slide on the paved walkway. The muscles in my upper body burned and cramped from exuding as much force as I was physically capable of. I knew I was going to lose this struggle. Eventually, after what seemed like forever, the pressure stopped and I was able to shut the door all the way, reached for my key and locked it. I bolted to my car and drove away, trying my best not to have a panic attack. I called in sick the next day, which was luckily a Friday. You couldn't imagine how relieved I was that the next week was the end of my regular duties, and the church put me to work volunteering at their youth event out of town. I never told anyone about what happened. A few months afterwards, I found out that the pastor of the church had started an affair with a woman he met online. He had started the affair online about the time I had the first instance of sleep paralysis. Worse yet, he left one Thursday to finally go meet her in person. You guessed it, it was the Thursday when the stuff seriously went down for me. I had actually seen him grabbing some stuff from his office across the street from the church that morning. He told me he was leaving for a convention, but he was actually leaving to meet the woman he'd met. Before all of this came to light, near when this happened to me, he told the church he was stepping down to take care of his terminally ill wife, That was a lie. He shortly left his wife and their children, cleaned out their bank account, and left his family without a penny. Thankfully, the initial prognosis on his wife was wrong. She made a full recovery, and her family was taken care of by the church until arrangements could be made for them to live on. I can't help but feel like his actions are what caused, well, whatever the hell was in the church to happen. I can't be sure, but I think his profane actions invited something in. That wasn't my last time dealing with such an entity, but I still count it as one of the most frightening moments of my life. If you guys are interested, I'd be happy to share the second interaction. I never did learn what it was that terrorized me. If any of you have experienced such a thing, please comment and let me know. I originally posted this on No Sleep years ago, but I didn't really understand that was for fiction. I figured you guys would appreciate this more. Posted by user oldby37. Hey guys, Undy here. Well, wasn't that something? I do have to agree with our poster. It certainly sounds like something was invited into that church. I wonder what it could have been. If you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments down below. And next week, we're actually going to be going over the second part that will be mentioned at the end of this story. I hope you can join me for it. And until then, remember to like, share and subscribe. Good night.